Hi, everybody. I'm Andrea Cutt. I work here at Warner, and it's wonderful to be able to talk with all of you today. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about focusing on one course that I created in Eric's class and what I've done with that and my experience in working with students with it. So my background is that currently I'm an assistant professor here. I direct the K-12 school leadership program, which a lot of people can't really envision what that's all about, but it's basically teachers that are practitioners in the field that are looking to go on to eventually perhaps be assistant principals, school leaders, or superintendents. So we work with students that typically have at least 5 years of teaching experience and are coming here to really think a little bit more about how they can take their skills as a teacher and widen those skills to be thinking a little bit more about school leadership. My background, I've been here at Warner for 4 years. Before teaching in the Ed Leadership program, I was a part of the pre-service science program, working with people that wanted to be science teachers. So my background is in geology, and originally I was an earth science teacher at the high school level here in Rochester. And then I went on from there to get my school leadership degree and my doctorate here at Warner. And I was a K-12 school director, a director of science, and then I was also an elementary school principal. So I had an opportunity to come to Warner 4 years ago and have a little bit of a different schedule while I was raising my family, and it has been so amazing. Such a great new challenge. I've learned things that I was afraid to do, I think, a lot of times, particularly around technology when I was a school principal, that have allowed me to really think differently about how we as leaders model for our staff and model for other teachers. So primarily what I teach here are the P12 school leadership courses. So these are courses, everything from managing school human resources to thinking about school culture and climate. I help co-teach a class on designing curriculum and how to really look at curriculum as you're working with teachers as a school leader and think differently about how that curriculum helps create an equitable environment for students and how the curriculum is tied to assessment. So a lot of what I experienced in designing this course is what I actually teach as good practice. But the course that I focused on is ED 469, which is called Leadership and Organizational Dynamics. And it's a course that I teach that is typically at the beginning of our program that asks students to really think about what does school culture and climate bring to a successful school organization, and how can you as the school leader know your own attributes and think a little bit about your goals and mission and vision, and then bring that to life and really create a healthy school culture. So it gets from, not just your staff, but your community, how you're interacting with parents in the community, how you're using resources within the community, and certainly how you're modeling and supporting a student management structure that creates a really positive and dynamic experience for your children in the school. So my students in that course are typically currently teachers. Some of them are teacher leaders. Sometimes we have people that have already entered administration and are given special permission to maybe work underneath a school principal and be an assistant principal or a teacher on special assignment. And most of them are currently still working in a school. Most of my students are not yet at a building or a district leadership. One of the things that's really great about Warner and about our students is that we attract students from not just within Monroe County, but throughout this region. And so we have students that are coming as far as sometimes 2 hours away from like the southern tier. We have students from Ontario, Livingston, Wayne County, and I'm sure I'm missing some, Yates County, that come in for the classes. So it's nice to be able to attract and have an opportunity to have varied voices from urban, suburban, and rural school districts that are coming into the course. I learned so much from being able to really step back from a course that I had taught before and think a little bit differently about how we deliver that course. In this case, for me, it was a hybrid online, so that students would come and be here at Warner every other week, and then on the off weeks, they were interacting with the course online. And so being able to do that was, a challenge as well as an opportunity, because students did have time with me every other week where we were all together. But then in the off weeks, they were off, thinking a little bit about their learning experiences. So I think the biggest thing I learned initially was Eric really helped us to think about our objectives. What are the goals of the course? And now having to really think differently about, okay, so this is a course that traditionally was taught in person in the past, but now that we're continuing to attract people from outside of Monroe County, how do we create an environment where people don't have to come to campus as often and can still have that experience? So really thinking about the objectives and what objectives lended themselves more to in-person and what objectives lended themselves more to some of the online experiences that students could have and the online discussions. As was said earlier, getting feedback was really critical, because at times I didn't have my student hat on, I had my instructor hat on. And so something that seemed really clear to me when a peer looked at it and said, I'm thinking about being a student in your class and trying to figure out these directions or having to understand how to look at this, all of a sudden it popped up that I was really missing something critical that students, wouldn't necessarily easily be able to navigate. So putting myself in the role of a student was really, really critical. And I had an opportunity to start to teach this class already. And so with students, starting to get their feedback was really, really great. I think probably my biggest lesson was the consistent language. I learned a lot about myself as an instructor and how I maybe sometimes bring in different language to mean the same thing. We love acronyms as educators. But even beyond that, things that I was calling a check-in or I was calling a quiz, and I was calling it the same thing in the online space. And so, the person that gave me feedback was like, is this the same thing? Because you're using two different terms. So it was helpful to really, again, really think foundationally about the message I was sending the students and how my directions were able to be processed when I wasn't necessarily right in front of them. So I think some of the things I learned about teaching is probably the biggest one when I then taught this course is that students had varying levels of experiences. Some of the students had taken many online courses, and so that actually was sometimes challenging because they walked in with their own background knowledge and own experiences. And so what I was calling a discussion board, they had experienced some of them differently in a different course where it was still called a discussion board. So I had some different expectations. So again, that vocabulary, what do I mean by we're going to have an online discussion? How do I define that, and what does it look like in my classroom space versus maybe one they've been in before? I had definitely some students, particularly because of their backgrounds and the fact that they're not engaging their own second graders in how to learn this way yet, who were really concerned and nervous and had a lot of questions around, am I doing this right? Is this what your expectations are? So recognizing that students are going to come to the table with different experiences and different levels of comfort. I think one of the biggest things that I've decided to do that I think is a really best practice is that the weeks that I don't meet with them, I hold a Zoom session where it's basically like an office hour. So they can go right into the course and they can click on the Zoom link, and I'm there in my office ready to talk to them about anything that they may have on their mind. So there's an opportunity for them to access me in a live space where they can maybe get some of those worries out or ask me questions or even have me look at some of their work because I maybe go those 2 weeks and don't see them in between. One of the mistakes I made initially was the group size. I had 25 students in my class, and so I was asking them to engage in a discussion board group initially with 25 of them. And so as much as it helped for them to start to get to know each other, it was a lot for them to have to review and then make comments. I required that they make at least 4 comments, but they still had to review everybody's writing. And so I learned very quickly the first week that was just too much. So we reduced it into smaller discussion groups that I then changed up as the course moved forward so that they were with different people and they had different voices throughout the semester, but they weren't necessarily in that really, really big group. And I think the biggest thing that I have loved, and now I've gone on to design other courses that I teach using this hybrid online format, is that it really was so powerful to see the online classroom environment that was created that was really as powerful as them being together. And I had that personal experience myself. Judy, who's going to talk to us later, she was a student in the course that I took with Eric. Today was the first day we actually met in person. And yet when I saw her, I gave her a big hug because I feel like I really know her well because she was one of the people that gave me feedback about my course, and Eric had put us in a group together. So it was funny because I could tell Eric was like, wait, how do you know each other? Because he had kind of forgotten. So that was really neat, the connection that students can still make. So I think the biggest piece is just dive in. Take a risk, try it, fail at it, and figure out what you need to do and learn as you do. Ask for that peer, and the students will give you really valuable feedback when you start to use the course. I think one of the things that I worry about, and so I put it in as something to consider, is I want to make sure that I keep my course really fresh and new. And technology is always changing, and teaching resources are always coming out, and new apps are out there. And so making sure that I'm updating my course and keeping it fresh, I think that's really a critical piece. One of the things that I learned, and students have given me so much positive feedback on, is before the class starts, have them create an avatar or even upload a picture of themselves so that when they're engaging in that online conversation with one another, they can see who they're talking to and they don't have to just look at the person's name. And that was really an important improvement that we made to the course, and students have really valued that. And then I talked a little bit about that Zoom session that each week is important to have. So thanks for the opportunity to talk to all of you.